Let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers loss to the New England Patriots, obviously 21-18 right from the jump. I mean, you want to chalk up last week against the Cardinals as their worst loss of the season. This one somehow maybe was worse. Just from start to finish, there was just no juice. Feels like everything started to boil over as the game went on and as things got worse. And then afterwards, obviously, players expressing their frustration and where they stand with this team and how guys maybe just don't have the right mentality as they approach this back half of the season. They are now currently 7-6. Just to lay out a little fun fact that is the complete opposite of fun after this game. The Pittsburgh Steelers, when I said at the beginning they made NFL history, they became the first team ever to lose back-to-back games, to be above 500, lose back-to-back games to teams at least 8 games under 500 in NFL history. They have now dropped out of the playoff race. They currently sit as the 8th seed behind the Indianapolis Colts, the Cleveland Browns, and the Houston Texans. They have 4 of maybe their toughest games ahead of them moving forward. And I mean, last night, if you were there, all you heard was boos. At one point, there was a couple of drunk guys in front of the press box just screaming to fire Tomlin. It was not the greatest night for the Pittsburgh Steelers or for the fan base or really for anybody. Now everybody wants to know the big question, really the only question that matters, is the season over? You sit here, you're coming off of a bad loss. How do you stand? Where do you stand on that question?
Well, I think the worst part of it is that mathematically the season is far from over. For all the reasons that we've talked about, is that, the AFC is wide open. You're still kind of in the thick of the playoff hunt. But the reality is, like, this doesn't look like a team that can do what it takes to climb back into the picture and be a serious contender in any sense, like for a playoff spot, for a division, for even more than that. It would just take something extraordinary for this team to kind of pull themselves back into a favorable position. And you just don't watch a game like that and think that, this team has what it takes to make their situation any better, to overcome all of the things that have gone wrong this year, to capitalize on the position that they're in, which is like that. Again, this league is wide open, like you're not fighting a bunch of, 12-win teams or anything. Like there are a bunch of teams that are on your level that are dealing with a lot of the same problems, and the Steelers are just unequipped every week to come out and capitalize on those opportunities that everyone else in the league is giving them. So while it doesn't, while you look at the standings and you're a little shocked every week to think, oh, the Steelers are still in the play. Like for so long, they were still in the play, in the playoff picture, and they've only fallen out now. They're only, they're not even that far back. But I don't know if we've seen anything over the past. I mean, even going back a couple weeks, like beyond these 2 losses, the most recent ones, that makes you think, yeah, this team has the mettle to pull together a run down the stretch of the season and capitalize on all these things that are working in their favor. So
I agree. It's you look at it and I compare it to, and this is immediately what I thought when I was putting together the, AFC playoff picture this morning and just realizing the Pittsburgh Steelers were out of it. My first thought was, all right, I am the worst fantasy football player on the planet. That's why I don't do fantasy football content. You could ask anybody in my family. We have my 2 brothers and my dad are all in my fantasy football league. We've been in the same fantasy football league since I'm 10 years old. I've never won it. I think I've had a winning season twice. I make the playoffs every single year, just barely. And I always just scrape by. And I look at it this time of year, every year, and I go, dude, I've lost 4 games in a row. How am I still in the playoff picture? And you just realize everybody around you sucks too. They just suck a little bit better than you do. That's where the Pittsburgh Steelers are. Outside of Cincinnati, this team has, they've climbed their way to where they need to be. I'll give them that. Like, you can't knock the 7 wins and say, they shouldn't count, blah, blah, blah. No, they won 7 games. That's impressive as itself. Where you are right now is the wrong place to be. And that's the problem, is if you won 7 games at the end of the year, if you started out 0-6 and now you're 7-0, the highlight of this conversation is not, the Steelers might be in a lot of trouble. The highlight of this conversation is, how far can the Pittsburgh Steelers go? But instead, they're about to enter week 15 at the lowest point they've been, not even this year, but really in the last 3 years. I have never, I mean, this is season 5 for me covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have never once seen a team, and I've been around the Mason Rudolph getting benched for Duck Hodges getting benched for Mason Rudolph going down and Duck Hodges going back in. I've been through it all. Never in these 5 years have I seen a team as bad as the Pittsburgh Steelers have been the last 2 weeks, just all around. I'm not talking one position. I'm not talking quarterback. I'm just talking mentality-wise. This is the first time it kind of feels like the Pittsburgh Steelers season is over, and everybody kind of accepts that the Pittsburgh Steelers season is over. And now you look at it and you go, well, these are probably your 4 toughest games of the season right now. Cincinnati's still in the playoff hunt. Indianapolis, like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but do you look at Indianapolis even as a winnable game? Because I view it as, this is a game the Pittsburgh Steelers should win. This is a game that Mike Tomlin typically wins. I don't chalk anything up to a typical Mike Tomlin anything anymore after what I saw last night. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your crazy neighbor, like shouting up to the stars and yelling, "Help!" We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong. So instead of drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all-natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. That's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. It fills the void in a natural, guilt-free way. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing while breaking your habit. I got this thing, and the first thing I noticed was how sharp it looks. This is probably the sharpest looking device I own. And then immediately I start fidgeting with it and realize how awesome that aspect of it is. And then when it comes to the taste, I mean, you can't beat the cool, crisp mint flavor. It's easily my favorite, and I haven't put this thing down since I discovered it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup with destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/allsteelerstalk or scan the QR code and use code allsteelerstalk to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. The Fume Solano launched last November, and you can upgrade your Journey Pack to the Solano to enjoy the premium walnut barrel and onyx black coated mouthpiece that has a smoother finish and still get 10% off. That's tryfum.com and use our code AllSteelersTalk to save an additional 10% off your order today. Do you even view Indy as a possibility? And if they lose, do you just give up? Is that the year?
I mean, to be quite honest with you, I mean, it feels like every game besides Baltimore is winnable because I think this team has proven that still the floor is, like, it's tough to separate their entire body of work from what we've seen the past 2 weeks, I think. Whether that's fair or not. Like, maybe these past 2 weeks have been who they are. You know, maybe that's just who we've got to deal with now, or maybe their earlier, run through the season is who they actually are. I don't really know. But I think Indianapolis is winnable, but you got two teams headed in completely opposite directions, so I don't chalk it up as anything likely. I'm not banking on it at all. I'm not banking on any of these final 4 games being wins because the Steelers just haven't earned the benefit of the doubt in any way. And going on with 3 out of 4 on the road, like, and like I said, Indy has momentum, and Indy has won a few games, and despite, like, you talk about a team that has had some resilience, like Jonathan Taylor in and out. Their starting quarterback, looked like a star early on, and then as a rookie, and then he goes down. Like,
Yep.
that's a team that's handled adversity really well, and they're, I think, still playing with some confidence. And the Steelers are going to go in, they're going to tell us all week that they're angry and they're motivated and they're getting back to work and everything, but this just felt deflating. And so I don't
Yep.
know how a team that is this deflated and has the air taken out of their sails this repeatedly and in this big a ways can walk into a stadium like that and have any kind of confidence. So I don't really have any confidence in them either.
Let me lay out this situation for you. So and I think we could both agree with this. There's a possibility, just knowing who the Pittsburgh Steelers are, being around these guys as long as we have. I don't think anybody sitting in this chat right now would sit here and say the Steelers aren't going to, if I lay this out, this is impossible for the Steelers. But you could see Pittsburgh winning against Indy, against Cincinnati, against Seattle, and then heading to Baltimore. Baltimore has already got the top seed in the AFC locked in. They're shutting it all down. Who cares? They beat Baltimore. Or even if Baltimore is still there, they beat Baltimore. And they squeak their way into the postseason barely. And here they are. Everything's fine. If they win the games the way that they have been winning games, because there's no way, I mean, there's a line between this is who the Pittsburgh Steelers could be, and this is just a little, you're living in a fairy tale land. They could win the games. They are not going to win the games impressively. That's just not going to happen. If they barely squeak by, they win these 4 games. They win in Pittsburgh Steelers fashion. They look terrible for 3 quarters, and then they pull out a victory 4 times. If you're a fan, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, do you even want that to happen at this point? Are you sitting here going, oh, yeah, can't wait? And I'm not talking like the few, because there's obviously a chunk that are like, you want to win at all times. The large majority. Do you think they're sitting here at this point going, do you think that it's real, it's honest, when they say, I'd rather them just lose out and get a better draft pick?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that is certainly real for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think you've just, everyone wants to make the playoffs, everyone wants to win as much as possible, but when you've seen this movie a couple times,
Yep.
and when you've seen a team kind of just barely squeak by every time, like, I don't know, do you want to spend another week just watching a playoff blowout? Because they're going to play a good team even if they sneak into the playoffs.
Exactly.
And I don't know, just I understand it, Maybe I don't necessarily agree, but I understand it. I mean, that's after I opened this by,
talking about the Patriots.
Right, talking about the Patriots.
Pick. Yeah.
But like, yeah, I understand it, quite honestly. I understand, like, not wanting to kind of put yourself through that, and like force yourself to watch a playoff game just because, you always got to give your team that hope and that chance to prove you wrong. But this team has almost never proven anyone wrong, or at least since, at least especially this year. Like, there very rarely have the Steelers kind of exceeded your expectations in a positive way. So I can understand why fans would look at a potential playoff matchup with Kansas City, or I don't even know who the other top seeds are.
Miami, Baltimore,
or Jacksonville might still
even
be
Jacksonville.
Up there.
Yeah,
right. I don't understand how a Steelers fan could look at that and think, yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be a good time to go to Kansas City or Miami for the opening round of the playoffs and just, like, in all likelihood, get your teeth kicked in. Like, that's not fun.
No, and that's where they sit. And I agree. I look at this situation, and if I'm sitting on the outside, if I'm a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm not, like, obviously you're rooting for your team to win. You want your team to win, but there's always that part of me that's thinking the ceiling on this thing is really low. Like, not kind of low, not it's really, really low. And it all season long, like, we've hit the point where it's week 14, about to be week 15. We know where the Pittsburgh Steelers ceiling is, and honestly, it's lower because Kenny Pickett isn't here anymore. And there goes any chance that Mitch Trubisky takes over this starting job long term, because that's just not going to happen. I mean, it's crazy. Maybe it's an overreaction, but I look at this Pittsburgh Steelers team and I say, you see how far they can go, and it's not far enough. And fans are at a point where they'd rather Mike Tomlin streak, and I shouldn't be speaking for the fans, so I'll take that back. Fans do not think this way. This is how I think. I think that if I was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, my thought process, there would be part of me, because obviously you want your team to win, like I said, but there would be part of me that sits here and says, I'd rather Mike Tomlin's streak end so that we could stop talking about how good he is as a coach because he just pulls off winning records and doesn't win playoff games. And that removes all excuses. At that point, you're a losing head coach. You're coming off of a losing season. You gave up, your team gave up on you. I'd rather have that as somewhat of negotiating grounds to get better than to just feel comfortable, which is what the Pittsburgh Steelers have been for the last 5 years. And I think there's a large chunk of the fan base that would agree with me.